My name is Lindsay English, student dietitian here at UND. As someone with a busy schedule and a hearty appetite, I'm always looking for new and quick recipes that are going to fill me up. Let's make one of my favorites, Chana Masala. Chana Masala is a traditional Indian dish. Chana actually means chickpea. So this dish is completely vegan for those who are interested in following that lifestyle, and it's just a great recipe for any night of the week for supper or for dinner. For this, we're not going to need too many ingredients. We're going to need one 15-ounce can of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, they're the same thing. One 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes. It doesn't really matter what kind or flavoring you use. It really depends on your palate or what you have on hand. One medium yellow onion. You want to make sure you have a yellow onion. 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. These ones are a little bit small, so I'm using 4 cloves. A little bit of olive oil, and then a lot of spices. So this, I'm going to need 2 teaspoons each of cumin and ground ginger, 1.5 teaspoons each turmeric and paprika, and 1 teaspoon each of coriander, cinnamon, and cardamom. So now that we've kind of got an overview of everything that we'll need, let's get started on the recipe. Before I do anything, I'm going to make sure to wash my hands. I'm going to want to wash them for 20 seconds, making sure to get in between my fingers, around my thumbs, under my fingernails, and making sure that I'm using soap and water. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to show you how to make this. The first thing I'm going to do is chop my onions and mince my garlic. So my technique for chopping onions, I usually like to cut off the top and the bottom, making sure I have a nice firm grip on that. So I'm cutting off the bottom, and then I cut off the top. And it's just a lot easier for me to peel the outer layers off that. So I'm just going to peel all this off. And I'll set this aside for waste. And then once I have that peeled, I'm going to cut my onion in half, and then I'm going to cut it into pretty even, thicker pieces since we're chopping this. And so now I have it cut like that. I'm going to turn it horizontal and cut about the same width. And now I have pieces about this size that are going to go into my pot when I'm cooking. And I'll do the same thing over here for the same onion. Chop, chop. And now my onion is already chopped, and that was really quick, and it's going to go in my pot along with my garlic. So I'm going to chop my garlic next. I like to do the same thing. I like to chop the bottom off with the garlic. Again, just makes it a lot easier to peel. Kind of break off the top a little bit. Peel my garlic. Sometimes it's a little stickier than others. Some garlic some cloves are really easy to peel, and other times you struggle like this. So I did that, and then I'm going to cut my clove into really thin pieces, and then kind of cut it in half. And then to mince, I'm just going to use quick knife motions, making sure to keep my fingers protected. Cut them into kind of a little bit bigger pieces, and then I'm going to kind of gather them together and go like this. I'm keeping the front tip of my knife still on the ground, still on the cutting board. I'm just moving the back half. If the pieces aren't super even for your onions or your garlic, it doesn't super matter. They're all going to get cooked down together. So now that I have this garlic minced, I'm going to do the other 4 cloves and then add them to my pot. So my next step is going to be cooking my onions. So the first thing I'm going to do is heat my stove up to about a medium heat, medium high, so that's going to be about a 7. If you have numbers on your stove, it'd be about a 6 to a 7, depending on how hot your stove might get. So I'm going to let that heat for a minute or so, and then once that's done heating, I'm going to add in 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. So I'm going to add my 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. You can also use other oils if you don't have extra virgin on hand. This just brings out the flavors a little bit better of the onions and garlic, and it really mends well with the other spices in this dish. So I added my olive oil, and I can already kind of see that in the pot it's kind of moving around, so I'm just going to kind of help it along. I want to make sure that it gets all over the edges so that when I add my onions, I'm able to stir it around and it'll cover the onions completely. So I'm going to let that heat for a few more seconds, and then I will add in my onions. So I'll do that now, and since I kind of chopped up my onions pretty roughly, I'm going to have to kind of break them up as I put them inside the pot. They'll kind of start sizzling a little bit when it's hot enough. If it's not hot enough, that's okay. They'll get sweat down. Starting to hear a little bit of that sizzle as I add these in. So I added all of my onions to my pot. And to help sweat them down, I'm just going to add a pinch of salt. So a pinch, I'm just going to put a little bit in my hand and add a pinch or so. A pinch is probably about 1/8 tablespoon to 1/4 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon, excuse me. And then after I added my salt in, I'm going to stir everything around. I want to make sure all of the onion pieces are at least a little bit coated in the olive oil. That's going to make sure that they heat up nicely and that they get nice and soft. So to make sure that they get nice and soft, I'm going to add the cover. This technique is called sweating the onions. I want to make sure they get nice and soft. So I'm going to put on the cover and let these cook for about 3 to 4 minutes, stirring with my spatula occasionally to make sure that they don't get black on the bottom. They'll be a little bit brown, but we want to make sure that they don't burn. So I'll let those cook, and then I'll come back and add my garlic. Alright, so my onions have been sweating for about 3 minutes. I can hear them kind of crackling, and they're starting to get a little bit translucent, kind of making, they're a little bit more clear. So that means I'm going to add my garlic now. I'm going to take off the lid. I'm going to make sure that I'm standing back a little bit because there's going to be a lot of steam that comes off here. So you can hear that sizzle from the onions. Set my lid down, and then I'm just going to carefully scrape my garlic from my cutting board. I'm going to drag my knife along there real carefully to get the rest of the garlic. And so now that I have my garlic added in here, I'm going to stir it around. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, down to a 6. Onions are getting a little brown, so I want to kind of make sure that they don't burn while they're in here. So I'm going to let the garlic cook down a little bit with the onions, again for about 2 minutes. So now it's been about 2 minutes since I've put my garlic in, so I'm going to take off the lid. I'm going to turn this down to about a 4. So I just stir my onions around and my garlic. They're a little bit dark, but that's okay. And next I'm going to add in my chickpeas. That liquid is really going to help kind of bring everything together, kind of bring all the flavors from the bottom of the pot out. And then add in my tomatoes. And then I'm going to switch over to a spoon to stir this around. You can use, you can keep using your spatula if you want. So I'm going to stir until everything kind of comes together. I'm going to get up the sides where there might have been some things. And then my next step is going to be adding in all of my spices. So I have 2 teaspoons of cumin, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, 1.5 teaspoons of turmeric, 1.5 teaspoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of cardamom, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and finally 1 teaspoon of coriander. And so now that I have all of that together and I turn my heat down, I'm going to mix everything up. I want to make sure that all of the spices get mixed together, and it's starting to smell really good. So all of those spices and that onion, they're gonna create all of these really awesome flavors within the pot. So I'm gonna mix that around, and I have my heat on about a 4 now, and I'm going to let this get up to a simmer, and then I'm going to cover it and cook it for about 15 minutes. If you have more time than 15 minutes, you can keep it going, simmering. It's just gonna bring the flavors together even more. But after 15 minutes, everything is going to be cooked down. The onions and the garlic will be really soft. The chickpeas will be nice and soft, and it'll be ready to serve. This is what the dish looks like when everything is all together, and you can see it's starting to simmer a little bit. You can see that the spices aren't completely broken down yet, so I'm going to keep mixing throughout the 15 minutes while I'm cooking this. All right, my dish has been simmering for about 15 minutes. I'm gonna turn my heat off, give it a couple more good stirs. I was being sure to stir it occasionally throughout, because I made sure it was nice and simmering. And now it's gonna be ready to eat. So I'm gonna set this one aside, and I've got my big ladle over here to scoop into my bowl. It smells really good. I wanna make sure I get a good amount of all of the chickpeas and tomatoes. And there we go. Ooh, a little bit of mess, but that's all right. And here we have it. We have a 2-serving Chana Masala for our fast, cheap, and healthy meal for this week. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy.